We're in the immediate aftermath of the second Fort Hood shooting, and as always in situations like this, we're now trying to understand what happened, why it happened, and how we can prevent similar shootings from happening in the future. Many of the arguments you're hearing, both from the left and from the right, are the ones you always hear after mass shootings like this. And the pro-gun advocates seem to have settled on, this is a base where you're not allowed to carry your guns around. All the soldiers are not armed at all times. That's why it happened. If only they had all been armed, perhaps this wouldn't have happened or so many wouldn't have died. Now, I could give you my opinion of why I believe that's ridiculous, but let's pull in the big guns, so to speak. We've got retired Colonel Jack Jacobs, who explains why he thinks that is a ridiculous argument.
The situation that existed at Fort Hood the other day, in a circumstance in which everybody has weapons, could very easily result, and probably would have resulted, in an enormous mass fratricide, and you would have this all the time. Arming everybody in a civilian situation like at Fort Hood would result in a terrible, terrible tragedy larger than this one. The assumption is the shooter values his own life more than he does carrying out what he's going to carry out. And therefore, he's not going to do it if everybody else is armed. Complete nonsense. We saw with Lopez, for example, he killed himself. And the large majority of mass shooters do exactly the same thing.
Now, we didn't have, obviously, you could watch the entire interview there, but he had been arguing with a guy who, although he has no military experience, like Jack Jacobs, has been peddling these theories for a number of years, more than a decade.
The guy's he's an economist.
Exactly.
The guy who's arguing with John
Lott. Which that doesn't mean he doesn't have anything to say about guns, certainly. No. But the former Medal of Honor winner, Jack Jacobs there, I think that he knows what goes on in a military base, how they would be likely to respond to a mass shooting, that sort of thing, a little bit better than the economist, perhaps.
So I used to know Colonel Jack when I was at MSNBC, and we had a good relationship. He's a really great guy. He's fun. He goes around the hallways sassing people and stuff. And of course,
unarmed.
Yes, that's right. And he obviously has vast experience in this. And later in that segment, first of all, the guy was trying to interrupt him, and he's like, I'm going to need you to be quiet for a little bit.
I love it. I love it. He commanded the room. That's what he did.
That's right. Well, that's because he's a commander. He's a colonel. And he said, look, we've dealt with this for a very long time because we're the military and we have a lot of guns, okay? Yeah. And we know that it's a terrible idea to arm everybody because, among other things, what happens when everybody starts shooting? And then you've got a bunch of people shooting at one another, and it's chaos. And it's the exact opposite of what the military wants, which is order, right? Yeah. And second of all, it does not help when you have commanding officers, et cetera, telling you what to do, and everybody's armed. It's just a recipe for disaster.
Not just everybody who has, for better or worse, because that's what the military does, has been trained to use weaponry. So there is a tendency when you're at a military base, I'm guessing having never ever spent the night at one, that in fact you are trained to use those things. That's an impulse. Whether it's the first impulse or not, it's an impulse that can happen. So it makes all the sense in the world that you wouldn't just have everybody armed on a military base.
I feel like with a story like this, you get the same arguments over and over again. Like now we have shootings almost on a daily basis. These mass shootings happen more and more often. And it's frustrating because there never seems to be any type of resolution, right? You have one side of the aisle calling for more guns in order to combat the issues that we're seeing right now. And then you have the other side that uses logic and reasoning and says, hey, you know what? More guns in this type of environment is going to lead to more violence, more people getting killed, more chaos. And okay, so what is the outcome of all of this going to be? Because we can continue reporting on this story over and over again. I guarantee you in the next month, or at least the next 2 months, there's going to be a similar story, similar talking points, no resolution. So what happens now? That's what I want to know.
Well, unfortunately, the answer to that is obvious. Absolutely nothing.
Right.
Right. They tried the weakest gun reform they could possibly imagine, just the federal background check, plus with a couple of loopholes, because Manchin and some of the other conservative Democrats insisted in a couple of loopholes there. It was you literally could not imagine a weaker piece of reform.
And the loopholes that they insisted upon were insisted upon because they thought that would at least with those, they'd get it passed. Some of the people that supported those loopholes, not speaking for Joe Manchin, but some of the people that supported those loopholes said, this is not really what I want, but for the good of passing background checks, we're going to do it. Even that didn't pass.
And at that point, 93% of Americans had agreed that we should have federal background checks, and it failed anyway. So, look, I get on the Democrats all the time, but in this case, what do we want them to do, right? Yeah. It's a fair point that they can't weaken the bill any further, right? And then it would be literally non-existent. And it obviously can't pass. So,
Yeah.
and by the way, you would say like maybe another jarring event, or at least, but we've had jarring event after jarring
Yep.
event. This is the second Fort Hood shooting. I mean, it's
It's
absurd.
amazing.
They're beginning to do mass shootings in the same place over and over again. And nothing apparently will jar this Congress out of its complacency with guns.
The only thing that's really changed is that these jarring events are no longer all that jarring.
Right.
Because they've become commonplace. The fact
Yeah.
that Wikipedia has to have separate entries for multiple Fort Hood shootings is ridiculous.